Once again, this year we stopped and remembered 9/11 on the anniversary of the attack. And this year it's the 23rd anniversary, of course. And this past week, I was thinking back to the 20th anniversary 3 years ago. And it was really on my mind. So this week I went back and I found that weekend's feature from 3 years ago. Back then it was called For the Record, and it was audio only, no video. And I found it on the website in the archives. And I listened to it, and it struck me how really this would be just as relevant today as it was 3 years ago. So for Tom's Take this week, you're going to be hearing that audio-only episode from 2021. And just as I said then, I meant it then, I mean it now. Thanks to Kathleen Whalen of Whalen Financial for supporting this project. Many of us here don't have a personal connection to someone who lost so much on that day. Mr. Lee Ielpe's story will stay with you.
I want to tell you about Lee Ielpe. I met Lee when I worked at Northrop Grumman years later. In 2008, I was part of the team that was publicizing a new ship that we were christening in New Orleans. The USS New York was built to carry Marines and other troops into harm's way. In fact, some of the steel from the World Trade Center was in the bow of the USS New York. And it was there in the bayou before the christening happened and the days leading up to it that I met Mr. Lee Ielpe. He had been a retired New York City firefighter. His two sons were firefighters on September 11th. So what was he doing there for the christening of this ship built in response to September 11th? Well, he was with the 9/11 Families Association, which should tell you that he lost someone. In fact, he lost one of his two firefighter sons that day. Now, Lee Ielpe is well known for his advocacy work, and he and I really connected at the christening, had some good talks. And the clips I'm about to play come from a later interview that he gave that I found online recently. Here's a real story of 9/11 and Lee Ielpe.
On September 11th, all the special units in the fire department were notified immediately to respond. My son Jonathan was in Squad 288. He called me right after the first plane struck the North Tower. Hey, Dad, turn the TV on quick. Look at this. And he explained, look like a plane hit it. That's what we're getting now. And then in the background, you could hear that's what the tone alert. The tone goes off, which means that there's a run coming in for the company. He said, Dad, it's for us. We're going to the World Trade Center. I said, okay, John, just be careful. He said, okay, Dad. And that was the last time I spoke to John. So Brendan and myself immediately jumped in the car and we took off to the city. The drive into Brooklyn to drop Brendan off was something that could never be portrayed again. Helter-skelter isn't even the word to use. I don't know how to express it. There was no such thing, and I mean this in a good sense so you understand it, there was no such thing as law and order when it came to driving into the city. Red lights meant nothing. You got to the light, you looked both ways, you went through the light. And the funny thing was, it wasn't just you going through the light, it was loads of cars going through the light with that same expression on their face. And it was mainly guys, and they were all firemen and cops, and who else thought that they could help going in. Got to the firehouse, Brendan's firehouse, dropped Brendan off, parked his car, dropped him off. Kind of like thinking to myself, okay, how am I going to get to Manhattan? What am I going to do now? I didn't bring my gear with me. I just kind of just hopped in the car. I was more concerned about just getting into the city, concerned about Jonathan. He had a cop's car there. So I hopped in and we had a police escort over the bridge. We got as far as City Hall, couldn't go any further.
Now, when Lee finally did reach the site of the attack, he stepped into a living nightmare.
Horrible, gray, sooty clouds still hanging through the area. A lot of the walking wounded, plus just people that just want to get out. But you could look at them and there was kind of like blank expressions, just blank expressions, just people walking, running, walking past you, people that were bleeding, people that were being helped by other people. But I had a mission. My mission was to find my son. And, and seeing what I saw, thinking that, I'm just going to look for my son was correct. But it's whoever you came across. If they needed help, you'd help them. You can't bypass somebody. Because I'm looking for my son, you got to just, first thing you come across is the first thing you come across, and you work from there. But anybody that I came across at this point they were all dead. And it wasn't going to work out.
Again, you're listening to For the Record, an episode from around September 11th of 2021, the 20th anniversary of the attack. It's audio only because that's what the feature was 3 years ago. Back to it now.
Well, at that point, Lee happened across a construction crew that was willing to help out, legally or otherwise.
I haven't found one person alive. Nothing. They said the street is totally blocked off. There's no way for anything to get in. I turned to walk away. There were three guys there, civilians. The one guy who was like the leader of these three, you could see they were construction. He said, I heard what you said. I can get equipment, heavy equipment, to help you. Do you want me to give you a hand? And so I just immediately said, yes, of course. He said, what are you going to need? I said, we're going to need to move heavy steel I-beams, box beams. He said, okay. He said, listen, I know where I can pick up some sort of I forgot what he said, but some sort of a crane pickup. I said, you can get it? He said, I have to hotwire it. So what he's saying to me is I have to steal it. I said, hotwire it, no problem, go. So he went and stole it. Somebody's going to get pissed? So he went and stole it. Next thing I know, this equipment is coming down the street. This guy is walking there. He said, what do you want us to do? I said, well, start right here. Get these cars, get this chief's car, just pick them up, bring them down the block. Don't dump them in the street. You got to leave the streets open for access. He said, throw them on the sidewalks. I said, okay. Just picked them up like toys and just started bringing cars down the street. I have no helmet on. I just have a turnout coat on, maybe my moccasins or maybe boots, and I'm giving orders. And I'm telling them to grab this car and chuck it, take this truck and chuck it, move this thing and chuck it.
Lee Ielpi did eventually meet up with his firefighter son, Brendan, as they kept looking for Jonathan. Their personal search went on for weeks and weeks.
God, it's, every day, I was there every day, so try to think of every day, it's impossible. But we went up to the North Tower, the pile, which was about 6 stories high. This was a 111-plus story building that wound up being maybe 6 stories high, in a pile. Like a sand pile. Just picture a truck dumping the sand out. I did expect to find voids 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months down the line where you lift something or find a void and you finally can get into it and find 6, 7, 8, 9, 20, 30 people in it that died because they couldn't eat, they couldn't drink or whatever. Never happened. Not one time. Within 3 or 4 days, I kind of said to myself, we're not going to find anybody now.
Now, Lee and his family, in fact, eventually did get a phone call saying that recovery workers had found the body of Lee's son, Jonathan. Lee told me that he and Brendan, the other firefighter's son, helped carry Jonathan's body out of the rubble. He told me his family was lucky. At least they had a body to say goodbye to and bury. So many other victims had just disintegrated. So the question is, has anything changed? Depends on how you look at it. Look at it this way, 20 years in Afghanistan, where it looks right now like the best thing we did was take out Osama bin Laden. In those 20 years, we lost nearly 2,500 American service members in that country. That's not counting contractors. It's not counting civilians. Just American service members. A number nearly as large as the number of people we lost on September 11th. What had been organizations like the Taliban now have places on the world stage, or they're fighting for them. The Taliban runs a country now. The Interior Minister has a $10 million price on his head by the U.S. government. As Rod and I have talked about on the air recently, so many of the patriots who went to war in the wake of our darkest hour are now disillusioned, and they're grasping at conspiracy theories, maybe to make some sense of what's going on, where we're going. We went from what came to be known as a September 10th perspective to real issues of life and death, threats of terror hanging over our heads. A sudden seriousness just kind of sank over all of us. We're still under it. But now the darkness isn't as directly a product of the evil acts of September 11th, but of the shadows that have grown over the last 20 years. We distrust our leaders. We put ourselves first. We buy into theories. We not only question the opinions of those who disagree, but often we question their humanity, their decency, their motives. We're as jaded and scarred as we've ever been. I'm not optimistic that things are going to turn around and get better anytime soon. We lost our sense of security. We lost a war. We lost our connections to each other. And we're losing ourselves. We did have a September 10th attitude that changed when September 11th came along. Now we're acting very 2021. Like we've forgotten some very basic things. Goodness, patriotism, dialogue, debate, the spirit that brought us together thanks to that horrible, convulsive morning 20 years ago. And no one would dare suggest that we return to that time. No one. But we've so completely forgotten the caring for each other that event produced. The openness we had toward other people. We're no longer living with a September 10th attitude. In fact, the way I see it, we have a long way to go to even get back to September 10th.
No grand message, no profound thought. Just sharing with you a sentiment that I think is just going to be with us as long as we're around. September 11th, we're always going to be looking back on. But it's a question of what we do going forward. We're not there yet. I don't know that we will get there. I like to think we will. Thanks to Kathleen Whalen of Whalen Financial for supporting this project. Talk to you in the morning.